Okay, I'm gonna try this uno mas time. Okay, so let's. There's apparently I'm learning how to get the microphone working. I can see it's working right now. So let's get at it. All right. Let's get all the way up top here. It's Sandy Squirrel's newsletter. All right. The echoes of hatred, anti Semitism on college campuses, then and now, by Sammy the Squirrel. The specter of anti Semitism has haunted societies for centuries. Its venoms. Well, wait a minute. I don't have it on there. Let me share this screen real quick. There we go. Make sure I am still yes. Okay. The specter of anti Semitism has haunted societies for centuries, its venom seeping into institutions meant to foster enlightenment, free thinking, and debate. Today, college campuses support bastions of free thought. See, I messed that up. Supposed bastions of free thought have become flashpoints for a resurgence of anti Jewish sentiment, promoting chilling comparisons to the 1930s when Nazi ideology took root in Germany's universities before spiraling into the horrors of the Holocaust. But how close are these parallels? And what lessons can we draw from history, especially when we consider claims about the Nazi Party origin and the safeguards like the Smith-Mundt Act meant to protect us from propaganda's grip? And anti-Semitic or anti-Semitism in the 1930s, from brown shirts to the concentration camps. Every red thing is a link, okay? In the 1920s and 30s, German universities were not immune to the rising tide of anti Semitism. The Nazi Party under Adolf Hitler weaponized existing prejudices, blending them with pseudo-scientific racial theories. Student groups like the German Student Union fell under Nazi control as early as 1931. Fostering an environment where Jewish students faced ostracism, intimidation, and violence. Professors, too, were complicit. Sound familiar? Some were fervent Nazis, acquiesced for careerist reasons. And many supported the expulsion of Jewish students to restore peace on campuses. Now, that just doesn't make any sense. We hate the Jews, so let's just kick all the Jews off campus. That way, we won't have Jews to hate on campus anymore. Higher education, right? Yeah. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 formalized this exclusion, barring Jews from universities and professions, paving the way for in 1938, and ultimately the genocide of the Holocaust. This word right here is what this means. The Nazi agenda was methodical. It began with propaganda, posters, lectures, and publications like Der Stürmer demonizing Jews as threats to German society. Again, sound familiar? Universities, meant to be centers of reason, free thinking, and debate, became breeding grounds for hatred, with paramilitary groups like the Brown Shirts intimidating Jewish students and faculty, By the time concentration camps like Dachau and Auschwitz were operational, the groundwork had been laid in lecture halls and student societies where ideology trumped humanity. Again, sound familiar? Remember the media talking about rounding up all of MAGA and putting us in re-education camps? Anti-Semitism on campuses today, echoes or exaggeration? Fast forward to 2025, and college campuses across the United States are grappling with a surge in anti-Semitic incidents. A 2024 report from the House Committee on Education and the Workforce detailed how universities have failed to protect Jewish students, citing harassment, vandalism, and physical assaults at institutions like Columbia and Harvard. Protests tied to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have sometimes veered into anti-Semitic rhetoric with slogans and actions that Jewish students perceive as threats. And the Anti-Defamation League reported 751 anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. in 2013 alone. A number that has likely grown with campuses as key battlegrounds. Excuse me. The parallels to the 1930s were unsettling but not identical. Today's incidents often stem from political activism, particularly around Israel, rather than state-sponsored racial ideologies. Groups like Students for Justice in Palestine have been criticized for actions like displaying Nazi-era propaganda imagery or physically confronting Jewish students, as seen in a 2014 incident at Temple University. Yet these acts are not orchestrated by a centralized authority akin to the Nazi Party. Instead, they reflect a complex mix of ideological fever, ignorance, and sometimes deliberate malice. Now, the reason why I put this part in here is because I believe it's all George Soros funded NGOs, but I looked and looked and looked and tried to connect the dots back to George Soros with all of these and was unable to. So instead of writing something that's my personal feeling, I decided to put the facts in the story. Critics argue that diversity, equity, and inclusion, oh my God, frameworks on campuses can inadvertently fuel anti-Semitism by categorizing Jews as oppressors in a binary worldview. Ignoring their historical persecution, this echoes the Nazi tactics of scapegoating Jews as a monolithic threat. Today's rhetoric is often cloaked in social justice language rather than overt radical pseudoscience, unlike in the 1930s, where universities were complicit in state-driven persecution. Today's administrators are often accused of inaction or appeasement, not active collaboration. Still, the psychological toll is real. Jewish students report feeling unsafe, much like their counterparts in 1930s Germany. The chant of Heil Hitler by a 2014 Kansas City shooter, or the swastikas graffitied in New Jersey in 2023 evoke the same fear that the brown shirts are alive and well, but the scale and intent differ. Modern anti-Semitism on campuses is decentralized, not a precursor to state-sponsored genocide, which I believe is done on purpose so we can't compare the Nazi Party of 1930s Germany with Antifa of today. Plus, tactics have changed over the 90 years since the original Nazi Party formed. They even have very similar flags. This is the original brown shirts flag that they waved. Is Anti-Fascist Action, which means anti-fascist action, which is the same thing as the Antifa flag. It's just mirrored, and there's not quite as many waves, and it's a different color. Did Hitler build the Nazi Party on American Democrat Party? I started this article believing that Adolf Hitler, while serving time in prison and wrote his book, Mein Kampf, he made the claim that he used the Old South's Democrat Party as his model for his Nazi Party. After searching online for facts to back up this claim, I failed. I learned the true history of the formation of Nazi Party. Even though Adolf did admire the Old South's Democrat Party, he did not form the Nazi Party from it. A provocative claim suggests that Hitler modeled the Nazi Party on the American Democrat Party. This idea, often circulated in fringe circles, including myself, requires scrutiny. The Democrat Party in the early 20th century was a complex coalition, including progressive reformers and segregationalists, Southerners. Support for Jim Crow laws and radical heresies in the South has been cited as a potential influence on Nazi radical policies, particularly in how legal frameworks enforce segregation. Some historians note that Nazi lawyers studied American race laws like those upheld by the Democrats in the South when crafting the Nuremberg laws. For example, the 1935 laws mirrored aspects of U.S. policies that defined race by ancestry and restricted rights based on racial categories. However, this connection is often overstated. Hitler's ideology, rooted in European anti-Semitism and social Darwinism, drew more directly from figures like Wilhelm Marr in the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a forged document also popular in the U.S. among anti-Semites like Henry Ford. Ford's Dearborn Independent spread conspiracy theories that Hitler admired. But Ford was not a Democrat. He was an independent. And he was an independent industrialist. The Nazi Party's structure, with its paramilitary SA and centralized propaganda, had closer parallels to European fascist movements than to decentralized factional Democratic Party. The claim also ignores key differences. The Democrat Party, despite its flaws, operated within a democratic system, not a totalitarian one. It did not advocate genocide over territorial expansion, core tenets of Nazism. While American racism formed Nazi policies, the Democrat Party was not a direct template for the Nazi Party's formation. This narrative risks oversimplifying history to score political points, conflating systemic flaws with international malice. The Smith-Mundt Act, a bulwark against propaganda. The Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, officially the U.S. Information and Educational Exchange Act, was designed to promote American cultural and informational outreach abroad while explicitly prohibiting the government from directing propaganda at its own citizens. Enacted in the shadow of World War II, it aimed to counter the kind of state-controlled media and education system that enabled Nazi propaganda to thrive. The Nazis used radio, film, and schools to indoctrinate Germans, fostering anti-Semitism and obedience. Again, sound familiar? The Act's architects sought to ensure the U.S. government could not manipulate domestic opinion in the same way, preserving free speech and independent media. The act restricted the State Department's international broadcasts, like Voice of America, from being disseminated within the U.S. This was a direct response to fears of government overreach inspired by both Nazi and Soviet propaganda machines. By limiting domestic access to state-produced content, the act aimed to protect Americans from the kind of ideological control that turned German universities into Nazi strongholds. However, the 2012 Smith-Mundt Modernization Act relaxed these restrictions, allowing U.S. government-funded media to be accessed domestically. I have argued for over a decade. This opened the door to potential propaganda, citing the rise of coordinated narratives in mainstream media and education. For example, some see parallels between Nazi-era control of information and modern concerns about government influence over social media, or curricula that downplays anti-Semitism, yet defenders of the modernization argue it was necessary to compete in a global information war, while adversaries like China, Russia, face no such domestic restrictions. The comparison to Nazi Germany is stark but not perfect. Nazi propaganda was overt, state-orchestrated, and tied to a genocidal agenda. Today's concerns about media bias or government influence are more diffuse, often tied to private corporations or ideological social media echo chambers. The Smith-Mundt Act's original intent remains a reminder of the need for vigilance, but its relevance to campus anti-Semitism is not indirect. It is if the MSM covered the Palestinian uprisings on campus, college, and university campuses correctly, this problem would already be over. The MSM needs to report more about the broader information ecosystem than specific anti-Jew incidents. A call to reflect. The anti-Semitism on today's campuses is not a prelude to the concentration camps, but it carries echoes of the 1930s, the scapegoating, the dehumanizing rhetoric, the failure of institutions to act decisively, the failure of law enforcement or judges charging and placing these violent protesters in jail, the claim that Hitler built the Nazi Party on the Democrat Party oversimplifies history, though it points out uncomfortable truths about American racism's and global influence. The Smith-Mundt Act, meanwhile, underscores the fragility of free thought in the face of propaganda, a lesson as relevant now as in 1948. We, the people, must act. Are we doing enough to confront hatred in our universities? Are we teaching students to question narratives, think, and debate, whether they come from peers, professors, or governments? History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes are loud. It's up to us to listen and act before the echoes grow louder. What do you think? Have you seen anti-Semitism on campuses or in your community? Share your thoughts below and let's keep this conversation going because it's an important conversation to have. Well, I guess that's it. I hope I can see that the voice vocal is coming through, so it should have recorded correctly this time. So I'm going to end the stream and check it out.